Doctors say that I shouldn't play football, but I still do. When I was younger, I was frequently at the hospital in the heart department. It's not so much pain, it's just sometimes tiredness. I'm determined to not let the syndrome affect me.
The syndrome is Marfan's syndrome. It's a disease that weakens every fibre in Andrew Ellis's body. The syndrome means Andrew has a time bomb ticking in his chest. The heart pumps blood to every part of the human body. Marfan's syndrome affects them all, damaging eyes, lungs and bones. But its most life-threatening effect lies inside the chest.
In Andrew's chest, the heart lies centrally beneath the breastbone. It consists of two pumps surrounded by the lungs.
The heart is a complex muscle. It beats 3,000 million times in a human lifespan, forcing the blood round the body once every minute.
If we look inside the heart, then we can see there is a thin-walled chamber and a thick-walled chamber. The smaller chamber delivers blood through the pulmonary artery to the lungs for oxygenation. It then returns to the thick-walled chamber to be delivered to the body through the aorta.
The aorta is under the greatest pressure. This vital tube takes the full force of the heart muscle. With every heartbeat, it stretches and contracts.
You can see from the thickness of this muscular wall that this is a very high-pressure system. And the weak part of the aorta, which is affecting Andrew, lies here.
Andrew's Marfan's syndrome has made his aorta weak and liable to burst.
This is a normal heart with the aorta attached. Normally, this aorta is quite elastic, but in Andrew's case, the aorta is losing its elasticity.
Marfan's weakens every blood vessel, but this is where it can kill. Andrew is not the first to be affected in his family. Andrew's aunt remembers his father.
On September the 10th, 1981, he just suddenly had an attack. We didn't know what it was at the time. What they discovered was that the aorta, main artery, had actually split open and he was bleeding. And they just had to sort of keep him resting. He was very reluctant to go to bed. He actually stayed up until 1:30 in the morning. And when I discovered him, I looked at him and he really looked to me as though he'd just peacefully fallen asleep. He was 23.
Soon after his father died, Andrew was adopted. He'll be 23 in 7 years.
I picked up the guitar first and then the keyboard, and it was quite coincidental because I'd found out that my natural dad Hugh actually played the keyboard as well and the organ, so my granddad plays the organ, so it obviously runs in the family.
In the last 15 years, doctors have learned to manage Marfan's syndrome. It all depends on careful monitoring.
Whenever it comes up to the time for a checkup, it starts to make me think a little bit and sometimes get a bit worried, but most of the time it's been all right, so hopefully this one coming up soon should be much the same. I hope.
The results of this test could change the course of Andrew's life.
Right, Andrew, what I'm going to do today is just do a scan of your heart, okay, using ultrasound.
The electrodes pick up tiny voltage changes every time Andrew's heart beats. The jelly ensures a good contact for the probe.
It feels a bit strange at times, a bit ticklish. Try not to laugh.
The machine uses sound waves to picture the inside of Andrew's body.
What exactly is going on at the moment?
What we're looking at is the aorta as it leaves the heart to check that the walls of the main artery haven't come away at all.
If blood leaks from Andrew's aorta, then his heart will stop beating. Measuring the aorta can spot that happening before it's too late. At this point, the aorta should be around 4 centimetres wide, but he won't get the results for a while. The next job is to check his blood circulation. It should be a one-way system.
So what you can see moving, Andrew, are the heart valves.
Marfan's syndrome can make the valves leak blood the wrong way.
That's better. Any blood flow towards the probe, which is up here, is orange, and blood flow away is in blue.
The direction matters because every cell in the body needs a continuous supply of oxygenated blood to keep it alive. Fresh blood leaves the heart through the aorta, the first part of a system of arteries that branch out all over the body. Because they're under pressure, arteries have thick walls. From the arteries, the blood squeezes through capillaries. Their walls are so thin that nutrients and oxygen can diffuse out to feed cells, while waste products move into the bloodstream to be carried away. The dirty blood is collected in veins. As it's now at low pressure, veins have quite thin walls and valves to make sure the blood flows the right way back to the heart. But before it goes round the body again, the heart pumps the blood in a short second loop through the lungs. Because of that second loop, the human circulation system is called a double circulation. When Andrew plays football, his heart adapts to the effort by beating faster without him thinking about it. But he can't afford to forget his weak aorta.
I became aware that I had Marfan's syndrome probably when, well, really since the first day I started school. The glasses that I wore were very thick and I was slightly taller and more skinny, so they reacted differently, and that's when it started to affect me. I'd say that as I've got older, I'm definitely more aware of it, and I now know my limitations and what I can and can't do.
When we found out Andrew had Marfan's syndrome, when we realised what the implications were with his heart, we thought, well, what do we do? You know, how do we cope? How will Andrew cope? Do we try and give him as natural life as possible, or do we wrap him up in cotton wool?
He adores football. I can't do anything about it, really. I mean, he's happiest when he's doing football, and it would be wrong of us to try and stop him.
At the end of the day, they're only being caring and they're parents, and that's what parents are there for, but it's a real passion of mine. I do sometimes get angry with them, but deep down I know they're only trying to protect me for my own good, so...
The heart is a muscle like any other. If it's fit, it can pump blood fast enough to cope with hard exercise. That fitness is called stamina.
Over the years, I've built up my stamina level, and it's now just as good, if not better, than a lot of people I know, but it's still certain times it still can get affected by what I do. If I do a lot of running, I do sometimes get a bit tired and out of breath.
That feeling of being out of breath is a sign that the heart is working hard to get oxygen to the muscles. The oxygen is carried by red blood cells. They contain a chemical called hemoglobin. In the lungs, hemoglobin meets oxygen from the air. The hemoglobin picks up the oxygen, forming oxyhemoglobin, which is bright red. Our muscles use oxygen to transform the potential energy stored in food into movement, kinetic energy. In the process, cells make carbon dioxide. Blood carries it back to the lungs and gets rid of it in our breath. When Andrew's father died, there was little that could be done to help people with Marfan syndrome. Even now, many die before they're 35. Although there's still no cure, surgeons can offer a remedy to help keep sufferers alive.
The remedy for Andrew's problem is to replace the weak-walled aorta. The surgeon will do this by making an incision as the aorta leaves the heart, and then inserting a tough plastic tube in the incision to strengthen that part of the wall.
One day, Andrew may have to face this operation. Professor Sir Magdi Yaqub pioneered open heart surgery, but even he can't guarantee success.
Still 22.
Now it's blood temperature. 30?
The first problem is getting to the heart. It's buried inside the rib cage. Behind the breastbone are the lungs. Professor Yaqub has to move one out of the way before he can reach the heart.
Forceps.
Pulling the ribs apart reveals the beating heart, packed in with all the body's other organs. It's impossible to work on the heart while it's still pumping. The surgical team must bypass and stop the heart.
You can see the ECG now has gone flat. We stopped the heart.
The heart will not restart for over an hour. During this time, machines will keep the patient alive. This one takes over from the heart and lungs.
Okay, go on proper bypass now.
These tubes are connected to large veins and arteries. They also recycle blood that is removed from the chest by suction. These pumps pump blood in pulses to mimic the heartbeat. A filter does the job of the lungs. It removes the carbon dioxide and adds oxygen to the blood.
What's the myocardial temperature?
All this machinery is needed to do the job of one human heart. But the machines cannot keep the patient alive forever.
Thank you. From the other stitch.
Surgeons gradually stitch the tough plastic sleeve into the aorta. They cut holes in the side to let blood flow up to the patient's head. Eventually, they restart the heart. Once they're happy that the tube is doing its job, they can begin to close the wound. Surgeons sometimes need to give patients blood to replace what they've lost through accidents or bleeding. There is no artificial substitute, so they depend on blood donors. Andrew's Aunt Barbara is one of them. Nurses take Barbara's blood from a vein on its way back up her arm to her heart. It doesn't hurt because this vein, like most veins, is just under the skin. Arteries are generally buried much deeper to protect them because they're under much higher pressure. Giving blood every few months is no problem for healthy people because our bodies make so much of it. 200 billion new red cells every day.
That seal there. Wrap this up.
In laboratories, technicians test the blood to make sure it's carrying no disease. They also check the blood type, because blood comes in 4 main varieties called blood groups. The red cells in each blood group are the same. They float in a liquid called plasma. Blood also contains cell fragments called platelets that help it to clot when we're injured. And white blood cells fight off disease. There are several types of white blood cell. They patrol the body, and whenever they find an intruder that might cause an infection, they stick to it and destroy it. If a patient were to be given blood of the wrong group, their white cells would see it as alien. They would attack, and the blood would clot in the body, killing the patient. It is vital that doctors have a good stock of every blood group, but there's always a shortage.
I think about the future, but not in a great extent. I just try and take every day and week and month and year as it comes, and then think about the next year.
The scan of Andrew's heart has brought good news.
The consultant said that my aorta's measured at about 4.1, which is roughly the same as before. So he said that basically I'll just have another annual checkup next year. So I'll go away and come back next year. And it's given me a bit of relief now. Slightly worried beforehand, but now I'm okay.
We're more than happy. It means, you know, we've got another 12 months probably before we start worrying again.
We know at the moment it's slightly enlarged from last year, but not anything to worry about at this stage. And so for another 12 months, it's like, phew, we haven't got to worry about it for 12 months, providing nothing happens in that time.
I've got it. I can't do anything about it. There's no cure for it, so I might as well just get on with life, because at the end of the day, I could go out just for a walk along the road and get hit by a car and killed, so I might as well just do what I can while I can.